everybody. So, it's apparently supposed to be Parsha shiur, but it's a Hanukkah class. So, just in terms of Parshas Vayeshev, it's the story of Yosef, in addition to many other parts of the Parsha. And Yosef gets sold into slavery, and his life gets spared by his brothers, and Yehuda comes up with the idea that this would be a way of getting rid of the object on their path in terms of their vision of what the Jewish people are supposed to become. And he ends up going and serving in the house of Potiphar, most royal family other than Paro's in the land. And he ends up having a very low-level existence for many years until he gets into legal trouble when he is set up by Potiphar's wife in order to, she fancied him and wanted to be with him, and he had more significant scruples than she did, and she withstood her advances, and she was able to blame him, and not until years later, when he made the right friends, was he able to get out. In the story of Yosef, there's a little bit of an interjection with regards to his brother, and also Yehuda, and the episode with Tamar, where Yehuda did not do well by Tamar, did not let her be cast off, and the fact that she should have been part of his family, and he forgot her, and then eventually he didn't recognize her, but they ended up in a very promiscuous situation, and eventually Yehuda came clean with regards to the fact that he did significant injustice with regards to her, and he was responsible for what happened to her. And eventually, to some extent, he turned a negative into a positive by making up for what he did by taking responsibility for it, and that is seen as a very significant positive. So Ariel asked me to just touch on the Parsha. That's me touching on the Parsha. And next time, hopefully, I'll prepare something. I'll try to be a little bit more diligent about that. Okay, so Hanukkah is next week, and I'm really fascinated by the personality of Yehudis. This is a women's class, and I think Hanukkah, to a very large extent, is a women's holiday. Now, it's not really a women's holiday, but there are 3 holidays where women are given credit, and we're going to go through each of them for us celebrating the holiday. And we're going to see the primary sources that allude to this point, and we're going to see how Pesach is really representative of every time the Jewish people are saved, and how the Jewish woman is considered to be the main protagonist and the main reason why we made it out of Mitzrayim. If it wasn't for the valor of the Jewish women in Mitzrayim, then you and I would still be in Mitzrayim, and we're going to see some of those primary sources. So, we're going to start with source number 1. I don't know, we'll kind of go through it, we'll take turns going through it. I'll read some, you'll read some, and this is just a really technical point that the Shulchan Aruch tells us in source number 1, that that Hanukkah does not have any obligatory meals. It's different than Purim. There's no required meal, and it's different than Yontif. Riboy hasudo shemar b'mehem heim sudas harashus. All of the meals that we have on Hanukkah, and we do have festivities, we do have parties. There is special eating that goes on in family gatherings. Those are in the category of rashus. When you see that word rashus, you think of it as opposed to obligatory, as opposed to a mitzvah meal. Shelo kavim l'mishta b'simcha. The days of Hanukkah were not set as a time where you needed to have simcha and mishta, partying and meals, etc. Now, why is that? So the commentaries tell us the tradition is that Hanukkah is that Hanukkah is a holiday in which our physical existence was not put into danger, but our spiritual existence was put into danger, and therefore we do not celebrate Hanukkah like we do with Purim. Purim, our physical existence was put in mortal danger, and so we celebrate in a physical way. Hanukkah, we don't have that same existential threat. We had a spiritual threat, a spiritual existential threat as opposed to physical existential threat.
I mean, your little kids see Mordecai with his spear and not Mordecai. Wrong. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, they were fighting for the right to have religious freedom. They weren't fighting for the right to live. The Greeks would have been very happy to keep us alive if we all would become Hellenists, complete Hellenists, and given up on our Judaism. So that is that. But look at the Ramah in the Haggadah. Yesh omrim sheish ksas mitzvah b'riva hasudis mishum devosim yom haya Chanukas hamizbeach. This is a time where actually historically we recall the institution of the Mezebach and the Beis Hamikdash. So there really is some sort of festive meal that should happen as per custom, not law. So, and he's talking all about meals. We should have meals, and we can make them mitzvah-oriented meals as opposed to just non-mitzvah-oriented meals, what we call rishus. And the way in which you can uplift and raise the level of this meal to a mitzvah-level meal is through having song and praise of Hashem and saying thank you to God, etc. Now, for the part in which the shiur begins, Yesh Omrim Sheyesh Lech, this is the Kolbo and the Ran that he's quoting from many hundreds of years ago. Yesh Omrim Sheyesh Lechol, Gvina v'Chanukah. There are those who say that we should have dairy product on Hanukkah. Not Shavuos, Hanukkah. Lefi shahanes nasa b'cholav she'achila Yehudis esa oyev. So, and this is because there is a miracle which took place in which Yehudis, Judy, Yehudit, gave such dairy product to the general, to the enemy, and was able to slay the enemy. And that is a major part of the story of Hanukkah. So major, in fact, that we'll see that, again, she's compared to Esther. And this is where the shiur is going to talk about that. How and when is Esther allowed to give up her life for the sake of the Jewish people? Why is Yehuda allowed to put herself into danger? How is it and why is it that the Jewish women are always the people that take us from a point in which we might not ever make it back, and they save us? So we're going to draw those lines of connection. So, so how is this? Where the Shulchan Aruch has to get it from somewhere. So the Chaber Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, 1500s, Code of Jewish Law, the main book by which you and I live our life today and know traditional Judaism, the Shulchan Aruch. So it comes from the Gemara in Shabbos. Now, unlike Purim, that has Maseches Megillah inside of Talmud, there is no Masechta for Hanukkah, but there is a section here in Shabbos which goes through Hanukkah. And this is what they have to say. B'hashtam min halakha, this is source number 2. There are extra sheets on the back table. Joan, you want to pass them out? Did you get Leah? Okay, we're good. Great, perfect. Okay, you didn't get. Okay, there they are. So, Vahashta, Damrina Halakha. For those of you who prefer the English, there's English there for this source. And Hadlaka Osa Mitzvah, Hadlika Cher Shutta V'Katan Lo Asab Lo Klum, Yishavadim Hadlika. So, talking about the category of Jewish people who are generally exempt from time-bound mitzvahs. After all, this is only 8 days in Kislev, this is only nighttime, etc. Time-bound mitzvahs. The Amar Rabbi Shub Levi. Shimon Levi says, Nashim Chayavas B'nei Chanukah Sha'af Hein Hoy B'Oso Anes. They are part of the miracle. Now, doesn't you and I would what is that? What we're going to talk about later is what do the words Af Hein mean? why does it say for they too were in the miracle? In what way were they in the miracle? So keep that question in the back of your mind. Source number 3, the Mishnah Brura, talking about, I wanted you to see the original source in the Gemara for Yosef Karo. This is now more modern times, late 1800s, the Chavetz Chaim, his comments for our purposes in modern times on the Shulchan Aruch. So he writes, She'achila Yehudis. What does that mean? What did Yehudis exactly do? Who was Yehudis? He haisa bito shel Yochanan. It's not just a legend. We know who her father was. Her father was Yochanan Kohen Gadol. You know who Yochanan the Kohen Gadol was? He served for 80 years. That is much longer than the average tenure of a Kohen Gadol. He was a very prominent individual. So where did she get her strength from? Came from, now it happens to be that her father eventually fell prey at the end of his life to the Enlightenment. He became a tzedukah. What are tzedukkim? Tzedukkim were a group of Jews who actually fell to Hellenism to a very large extent, and in fact, they kind of rejected the oral tradition, and they were like an early kind of Reformation. So here was the daughter of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, v'haisek zer shekol arusa. All betrothed women, tibola tafsar, needed to have relations with the general first. Before her husband. That was part of the edict of the evil decrees against threatening their spirituality and their faith. Ve'achila l'rosh hatzorim, going on to page 3. She fed the top general this cheese, l'shakruso, and he became under the influence of this dairy product, and he dozed. V'chatcha et rosha, she cut off his head. Baruch hu kulam. So she was very brave. You can imagine she was putting herself in very significant danger. You can imagine that she was risking her own life through her actions. Why are you allowed to? Now at the time, like we said, there is no actual physical threat to the existence of the Jewish people, which is, again, why there are no meals which are required. And why is she doing that? Now, we know that with Esther, she goes in front of Achashverosh, she puts her life in mortal danger, and she has this whole plan. You know, the whole Jewish people were going to be attacked, going to be destroyed. This is not that. So we're thinking of comparing and contrasting the two. So let's see and this she galvanized. It's considered based on the Chavetz Chaim is telling us the tradition. If Yehudis would not have done what she would have done, then we would not have been galvanized, we would not have had the confidence, we would not have been able to overcome the Greeks. And this act of bravery, this courage, this very violent but necessary act was something which was able to really propel us to preserve our identity. That was her act of courage. So Tosfos, and the reason why I'm going through it is very little written about this. But there's enough written about it that we need to take it very seriously. This part of the story of Hanukkah, which does not get talked about enough, and that I have a real fascination with regards to this part of Hanukkah. So source number 4. Tosfos says, we saw in the Gemara in Shabbos, and there's a cross-reference here in the tractate of Psachim. Tosfos says, what does that mean? If you would not have had this reasoning, this argument that they were part and parcel of the miracle, and we're going to have to define, what does that mean they're part and parcel of the miracle? We're going to see. I'm going to repeat myself, but that's okay. We're going to see. Does that mean that they were part of being saved from? Obviously, they're Jewish, so part of it. Or does that mean that they wrought the miracle directly? What does that mean? So, but Tosfos says, just on a technical legal level, if they did not have this rationale of them being part of the miracle, then it would just be like many, many other mitzvos in the Torah, which are time-bound. So this undoes what is generally an exemption. So, okay, because the Nashim Turas and Mrs. Ashish is Magro, Afagav, Darba, Kostas, Darabanon, Kein Darais the Tikkun. Now, this comment is said in Tractate Psachim. It's talking about Pesach. You give Michelle a packet, okay? Good. So the 4 cups of wine are considered to be the expression of this miracle. And women are expected to have the 4 cups of wine. We all know this from common practice, but why is that the case? The reason why that's the case is because of this famous line, that the righteous women allowed the redemption from Egypt to take place. And what does that mean in that context? What does that mean? It doesn't mean that just they were at risk. It means that they were the ones, their righteousness, they didn't give up. They maintained the faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why they actually brought the miracle to the fore, to the surface, because of their actions. So when we apply Afhein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes, and we apply it ubiquitously, we apply it universally to all these holidays, so we apply it and we say that they actually did something proactive. So just like Yehudis did something proactive, and is considered to be Afhein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes, so too the women of Mitzrayim did something proactive, and Afhein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. And this isn't just a historical fact, it impacts the legal requirement with regards to the commemoration of the miracle. There's an article I always printed every year that I wrote for YU to Go years ago. It comes out Purim time. It's about Purim and how there's a parallel. Every time you have a mitzvah that's about publicizing miracles, it says even if you have to sell the shirt off your back, or if you have to sell yourself out as a day laborer, you have to make sure you have enough wine for a dollar kosher. You have to make sure that you have enough resources to do Hanukkah menorah. Yeah, there's a common thread. There's a common thread when it comes to Pirsumei Nisa, of making sure you extend yourself, and I'm sure that applies to Purim as well. Okay, source number 5. Again, this is the Rashbam, grandson of Rashi, also on the side of the Gemara in the 10th chapter of the Tractate of Psachim. What does he say about those famous words? Afhein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. He says that the Amar Masechah Sota B'Schar Nashim Sikonias Hayu Ba'oso Adur Nigalu. He quotes what I just quoted to you from the Gemara in Sota, that the reason why we get redeemed is because of righteous women. Now you and I would ascribe this specifically to Mitzrayim. And that's where it's most important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have become people. We wouldn't have gotten the Torah. We'd still be in Egypt right now. But it also applies to Hanukkah and Purim. But what does it show you? And there's a template that happened. There's a model to follow. That when the Jewish people are in trouble, the women come to the rescue of the Jewish people, and they have something within their nature to be able to carry that through. So, if you use Mitzrayim, that redemption, that exodus, as a model for everything going forward, so that is the way to look at how we get redeemed, and when we get redeemed, and who's behind it. So, and Rashbam continues, when it comes to reading the Megillah, that is something that women need to do, and we're publicizing the miracle, because the Jewish women throughout generations are all connected, whether they know each other or not, and Esther was able to allow the Jewish people to survive in Shushan, in Persia, and therefore, of course, even though it's a time-bound mitzvah, they need to be there at the Megillah reading, and they need to make sure that they're reading along, and they need to follow every single, just because they were the ones who actually made this happen. So that's what the Rashbam brings to the fore. Okay. All right, Ariel, you want to read source number 6?
Because it's the longest one?
Because my voice is tired.
Okay, can I just ask a question?
Questions are always allowed.
Okay, now I know this might sound like a silly question.
No such thing as, yeah, there are silly questions.
I've read a lot of Hanukkah kids books recently.
Do they talk about this?
They talk a lot about Yehudis. But I'm a little confused because some of them are slightly different than the others. And I understand that they're
That's why we're going through primary sources.
Right. And I'm saying they're not obviously in kids' books going to talk about the night of her wedding and that's why she went to the general.
Right.
So I'm just asking, like...
A common way back then, and not just against the Jewish people, common way in ancient times where conquering, occupying forces subjugated the people lower down on the totem pole, the lower class, was to kind of institute this.
No.
Yeah.
So I remember learning this story like from the sources and what we said.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious kind of about the time frame of when this is occurring. Meaning, I know that Yehudis is Matisyahu's sister.
Yeah.
But it sounded like she was living in a totally different town than Modi'in.
Yeah.
And the general had seized that town. Is that actually part of the story, or did they just make that up so that it would be more exciting for the kids?
It's very interesting because the Mechaber only tells us a little bit. The Mishmer adds a little bit more detail, and then the rest is kind of legend. And it's tough to really know the specifics.
Right, because they talk about how they cut off all of the irrigation.
It would make sense. It would make sense that is what happened, just based on geography and based on what we know about the Chashmonaim in general. But
I remember it the other way. I remember learning it how she comes out with his head in her hands and says, basically screaming at her brother and her nephews, saying, "Now you have to go and actually fight this war."
I think that the details are it's hard to pin them down, and I think that there are probably different strategies about how much liberty we take to be able to play with those kinds of details. What we know is that she cut off her head. What did she do with that? Did she put it on a stake? Did she take it out?
Right.
I mean, it depends on those sources. I didn't come across those sources that I felt comfortable sharing, saying, okay, these are verified sources, this is what happened, etc. Yeah.
I would say these are probably secondary sources.
This is your holiday.
It's like primary sources are the people that saw it happen and they wrote it down.
Right.
These are secondary. These are people commenting on things that they were told.
When I say primary sources, I mean tradition.
So there's Apocrypha, but I don't know if everyone believes there's a book called the Apocrypha.
Right, so
not everyone holds by
when
it.
you're talking about these Torah sources that we're talking about, when I'm saying primary sources, I'm saying Jewish law and tradition, these sources are authoritative, as opposed to other publications which are not striving for transmission of tradition. They're striving for some sort of general description of what took place. So, I'm not saying the first-hand accounts. I'm saying primary sources with regards to tradition, not first-hand accounts. Okay, do you mind reading?
No. Okay. Since they were also part of the same miracle, Rashbam explains that the primary part of the miracle was done by them, Purim by Esther, Hanukkah by Yehudis, Pesach, for they were saved in the merit of the righteous ones of that generation.
Now, I just want to point out here that Tosfos is equating all three of these. Even though we have sources from Tanakh that talk about those specific redemptions, and we don't have a book in Tanakh that talks about Hanukkah, Tosfos assumes that tradition is strong enough that it's the same level of accomplishment, and he's equating them. That's going to be important as we dissect this going along. Yeah.
And this interpretation is difficult for the language since they were also...
Yeah, what does that Afhein Hayu mean? That's what he says.
Implies that they were secondary, and according to his, meaning Rashbam's, interpretation, it should have said, since they were. Therefore,
right. Secondary wouldn't make any sense if they're the ones who wrought the miracle for us. So he's trying to explain that language, yeah.
Therefore, it seems to me that they were also potentially going to be wiped out and killed, and so too on Pesach, when they were enslaved to Paro in Egypt, and in Hanukkah, the decrees applied to them too. In the matter of matzah, there is one who asks, why do you...
We'll stop here.
Okay.
I think it gets kind of technical. And so, so what I wanted you to see here is that they felt the need to explain, not that it's secondary, because obviously they were Jewish and they would be wiped out all the same. And Haman didn't make any distinction. Certainly Paro didn't make any distinction. And we'll see. They didn't really make a distinction with regards to Antiochus either. So,
but the mitzvahs that Antiochus were kind of forcing upon them to not do were mainly, bris milah is not actually a mitzvah that deals with the woman, surprisingly enough.
Well, except for the fact that a woman is obligated in bris milah when there is no when there is no father. So women, just like Zipporah gave Moshe, just like Zipporah gave Gershon a bris, so too.
No, meaning she can do it, but it wouldn't be an avera for her. It's only an avera for Moshe. That's why Moshe was the only one who was having difficulty living at that point in time.
So there is no avera on the father to not do it exactly. There's an avera for somebody to kind of be that way when they get to that. All there is a bittul aseh. You avoid your opportunity to fulfill a very important positive commandment, which results in kares. But and the other thing that I was going to say to you is that the other famous one is Talmud Torah, that they banned learning. And
that's not really a woman's thing either.
That's true, but
no offense.
Well, they're not technically obligated to learn day and night. Obviously, women are expected to know the laws because they keep the laws, and so they have to learn and know the laws. That's a separate topic for a different class at a different time. But Talmud, that's the thing. The interconnectedness of the Jewish people requires them to understand that they're part of a greater whole, and that they're being threatened, their existence, they're being threatened as well. In fact, just like the Rambam says with regards to circumcision, that the wife has to take, the mother has to take over if necessary, it says the same thing with regards to Talmud Torah. It's the same thing with regards to learning and taking them to school. So, okay. What does Rashi say about these words that we are analyzing in source number 7, bottom page 5? They were part of Haman's plan, of course. It's explicit. And what I think is important to point out, that if Rashi is saying this with regards to Purim and women, somehow, some way, as Ariel was bringing up, when we saw before that Tosfos equates all three of these, that means that in all three of these, they're equally threatened as well. And I don't think that's too much of a stretch. That's the way I'm interpreting it. When Tosfos equates them, then everything that applies to Purim, to a certain extent, for our purposes, can be thought of as applying to Hanukkah as well. Now, a lot of this is an extrapolation, because again, we don't have the level of detail with regards to Hanukkah. We just don't. Nothing was canonized, nothing was part of Tanakh, nothing was with the was Devar Hashem, written with Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, we are on. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Leah.
When we're saying this idea and this question about why is this terminology is afhein ha'ibos.
Yeah.
That's in regard to women having to fulfill the mitzvos having to do with any of the matzah.
Yeah, it's a technical point that we're analyzing that has, I think, also very significant hashkafic ramifications. So it has immediate impact with regards to what we do, but what we do, we should also understand the wisdom behind it. And so what we're talking about here is the fact that, we all know what we do based on what we've been doing for generations, but why is that? And the answer is that the Jewish people can't get out of this kind of level of trouble without some sort of heroic efforts by women. Yeah, what was your question?
So, but I think, are we trying to get to why it says afhein, like also?
What we're trying to do is understand more about how Yehudis, because even though we're celebrating the miracle of the military, we're celebrating the miracle of the shemen, of the oil. We don't get to the miracle of the shemen, of the oil, without the military victory. You don't get to the military victory without Yehudis. So how is it that they're part of the Hanukkah story? And the answer is that you don't get to the two miracles that we look at and celebrate without understanding the role that they play. So it's understanding the story of Yehudis on a more broad level. I think part of that is understanding the legal import of afhein ha'ibos ones, but part of that is understanding just the dynamic of the Jewish people and the way in which these women, and I think the point that we're getting to, women always, throughout Jewish history, help us get past whatever hurdle we're going through as a people. Yeah, you
I was thinking about, like, why don't women have, is it sort of like, I wonder why women don't have to sit in the sukkah.
Well,
Are we
I think
not involved
that's a great point. We suggested, and this is true, that even though the holiday of Sukkot commemorates Yetzias Mitzrayim and the Exodus from Egypt, specifically the Daled Kosos, the consumption of the Daled Kosos, the Seder and going through the Agada and the specific drinking of the Daled Kosos, that is a fulfillment of Pirsumei Nisa, and we're talking here about holidays that are at their core, essentially, a major component of them is Pirsumei Nisa. You don't have that nace, you don't have this fulfillment of Pirsumei Nisa with regards to any other holiday. Sukkot also. That's a good question, and we kind of glossed over it, but if you look at the end of source number 6, he touches on your question as well. Yes?
It just seems like a side point to this.
Yeah.
And it's a technical point, not to
Yes.
take away from the big
Yeah.
perfect point, is that,
It's both. To me,
right, they go together.
my opinion is that the best Musar Sefer is learning Torah. So, what is that? I have my personal favorite is learning Mishlei. Second most favorite Musar Sefer is learning Pirkei Avos. But the halacha is intertwined with it. Our Musar is that Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, he learned Musar from going through Chakiros and having different understanding of different laws within the sugya and Shas. That was his Musar, which I can understand. Yeah.
But the way I remember understanding this Afin Hayubos Harnish is these are like the Arabakosos and lighting the menorah and whatever are mitzvot saseh shasman grama.
Yeah.
Which you would maybe think that women are not obligated.
Right.
But because they were so essential in bringing about the miracle,
Right.
so don't think
It's
that
impossible
they
that this
exempt.
patur extends in this context. That's what we're saying. It's impossible that knowing the history and knowing what we're celebrating and knowing what's being commemorated, specifically these kinds of miracles and these kinds of dangers, that they wouldn't participate in light of their role, in light of the women's role. And and all of that is intertwining the two. Yeah, Michelle.
I had a quick question because I think you went over this before I came in. But when it's talking about women are obligated regarding the Hanukkah light, they're obligated to actually light or they're obligated to witness? Because normally the husband lights. So if I'm watching him light,
That depends. You're Sephardi or Ashkenazi. It
So let's
depends. Neri Shabbat. So I would do, whatever your mother did. Whatever your mother did. And
But you're not just watching, you're fulfilling through it.
no, but I'm saying, no, right, but I'm saying you're a part of it in that way, but are you literally expected to light?
yeah.
And I know it does
Let's
vary.
say Yosef doesn't come home until it's after nightfall already.
Right. Am I
Okay?
supposed to wait? Like,
You're
let's
not
say
supposed to, you don't have to wait.
Right.
You don't have to wait.
But if he's home
It's
in
nice
a
to
timely
wait.
fashion.
Yeah. It's
But-
nice to wait, but she doesn't have to wait.
But a
Yeah.
woman could light, even if her husband's lighting at the same time, she could light her own menorah.
Right. If it's considered
To
to
make
be
sure Asher
as if he's
understands.
lighting. If you light because he's not able to light, he's
No,
light.
but like Asher lights, but I have always lit my own menorah.
Yeah.
Right, I do too.
Let's talk about this at the end, if we have time. And you can pause 12 minutes from now. If we're not getting to this point further, you can stop me. Source number 8, page 6. Okay. Sir, you want to read? On the 25th of Kislev.
On the 25th of Kislev,
This is the Machaber, Shulchan Aruch.
so the 8 days of Hanukkah, and they are prohibited for eulogizing and fasting, but are permitted for doing work. The women have made it a custom not to do work while the candles are burning, and there is an opinion that says that we may not be lenient for that.
And the fact that this custom exists and has existed for hundreds of years, the first half hour that the candles are lit, women refrain from doing any prohibited acts of labor, to do any malacha. Does anybody know any women who keep this custom? Okay. Very good. So,
But what is considered work?
That's the
so
shot.
yeah, yes. So
Laundry.
no,
That's that's the biggest
When
one.
we use the
Washing
word
dishes.
malacha, we're talking about the paradigm of malacha, Shabbos malacha. Yeah.
Okay, Shabbos Malach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Why does it say this has to do with women specifically? The Mishnah Berurah writes, "Hanashim davka, nashim lefishin asanes ayadein." Not that they were part of the miracle, but that the miracle happened with their handiwork, and so again, when we understand historically what Afin Hayivos Anis means, the Chavetz Chaim, the Mishnah seems to tell us that it's not just that they were equally in danger; it's that they were primarily responsible for the miracle happening at all.
So
Okay.
it wasn't just, in a way, passive, they were active.
Exactly. Yehudis?
Does that apply to Jewish female slaves as well?
Does that? Yeah.
So you didn't have to work either?
Right,
Okay.
in Mitzrayim, exactly.
No, I mean in this time.
Like
that,
an Eved Ivri?
like an Evet Ivri that's a Jew.
This, when we're talking about
usually that
the
slaves
two
have to
subsequent
do- yeah.
occasions,
So they have to work.
Yitzis Mitzrayim offers us a structure that is then followed by Esther. I have no proof to this, but my suggestion here in this class is based on what I've seen, what we are seeing together, that Esther was successful because she was in the know. She was knowledgeable of what happened in Mitzrayim. Yehudis was successful. She was inspired. She was motivated. She was presented with an opportunity. She recognized this is the moment when a woman is again going to make sure that Jewish people survive. And so we're talking, again, to answer your question, specific individuals. With regards to Hanukkah, I'm talking about Yehudis. With regards to Esther, I'm not talking about all the women who lived in Persia. I'm talking about Esther specifically. Okay, why is it that she put herself in this mortal danger, and how is that allowed, and why is it glorified and honored that Yehudis was allowed to do this? Chapter 18, verse 5, in Vayikra Shmartim Skufasayvis Mishpatai, Asher Yaso Sama'atim B'chai B'hamani Adonai. So, in source number 10, we are told to keep the Chukim and Mishpatim, the laws that are difficult to understand, the laws that are not able to be intuited. And we are to do them, we're to live by them, for I am Hashem. So, she's putting herself in mortal danger. After all, she could do some mitzvos that weren't being prevented by the Greeks, and she's supposed to live, and it's an obligation to live, and she can very easily be put in harm's way. This could go awry. She could be assassinated with retribution. A lot of things can happen. So why is she allowed to do this, and why are we putting her on a pedestal for us to copy her? Source number 11. V'ata daber b'nei Yisrael lemor. Ach. B'sham society shmoru. Yosi v'eni v'nichn. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
By her, okay, it's very complicated, obviously, the whole situation with the general coming on the wedding night, whatever. And Esther, it's actually kind of a similar situation to some extent.
Yeah.
Esther and Achashverosh, and a big
Toso
reason,
seems to say it's the same on some level, yeah.
right, meaning that there's a lot of similarities in the sense that at least some of the Meforshim say that a big reason why Esther didn't want to do it in the way that, meaning to do it right now instead of just waiting for Achashverosh to come to her, was because once she does any voluntary part in the action, it's as if she's accepting it upon herself, and therefore it's like a real marriage between her and Achashverosh. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So is that the same thing also with Yehudis? Meaning, isn't that an issue, because then she's setting herself up for Giloi Rayos?
So what's your question?
So meaning that how is that not putting her into danger to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't that be a reason enough in order to put Yehudis, in order to put herself in danger by trying to kill the general, because of this idea that she would be setting herself up for Gilui Rayos, which is one of the three that you're supposed to die for anyway.
So what you're
assume that she's setting herself up?
That if she goes to him,
She's not. She was forcibly taken.
she was forcibly taken
that-
to him. She was forcibly taken to him.
yeah,
And did she kill him before or after before they had relations or after they had relations.
It's very confusing.
We don't know the details. There is another person that we haven't talked about yet.
Yael.
Yael. And it seems like,
Was it premeditated? I'm saying, did she know she would be taken?
at some point
And in
there's
her
some
mind-
premeditation.
In her mind, she said,
No, so
I
that's
know I'm
what
going
you
to be
know, what
taken.
did
I
she-
know
I'm
going to be
suggesting
forced
that
to know
she's
what
inspired, knowing her history as a Jew, that this is the moment when the Jewish people can
Right.
survive this.
It's a
So,
little weird to be.
I think that Ariel is correct, because you're talking about not just a case where she herself is now in physical danger, but you also have a case where she's in an adulterous situation. Now you have to remember, actually back then, I haven't thought about this till just now, but they really had erusin, they had betrothal before they had nisuin. So she is between engagement and marriage, and she's with him between that time probably, which is an interesting thing to consider. So it would be on some level adultery, let's hold on to that point, because I think that will be addressed later on as well. Here we have in source 11 that Shabbos, which is of course a very severe, it doesn't reach the level of what Yehus was going into, unclear, but it's a very severe situation in which a person, the only excuse you can have for breaking Shabbos would be pikuach nefesh, would be saving yourself from physical harm. And we'll see, does that extend beyond that? So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as well, because after all, this is a situation on some level of pikuach nefesh, or is it? Because again, it's a spiritual threat, not a physical threat. That's the nature of the miracle of Hanukkah.
Well, does it count? Meaning, if there's the halacha for a rodef is that you're allowed to go and kill them, but what
Right.
if it's a rodef of spirituality?
Right. So that's why we're talking this part of the class is about that. So that's what we're going to discuss.
Okay.
Leah, you want to read source 12, please?
Other Tanan debated this same issue. Yossi, the son of Yehuda, says that it stated, "But keep my Shabbatot." One might have thought that this implies to everyone in all circumstances. Therefore, the verse states "but," a term that restricts and qualifies. It implies that there are circumstances where one must keep Shabbos and circumstances where one must desecrate it, i.e., to save a life. But the other time, the Yosef says that it is stated, "For it is sacred to you." This implies that Shabbos is given into your hands, and you are not given to it to die on account of Shabbos.
Right. So you see from the words themselves, the words that we just read in chapter 31, that ach, it says, Es Shabbos society shmoru, and that ach teaches you, according to the Gemara, that not every Shabbos is meant to be kept, meaning that if there's a Shabbos where pikuach nefesh is at stake, you are to make sure that you desecrate that Shabbos so you can keep future Shabbosim. So does the same thing apply in other areas? Do you desecrate what the mitzvah or what the context is in order to make sure that you continue having that context? Can you break the Torah in order to make sure that people have the Torah later? So you look at source 13. Shulchan Aruch writes, if someone sees that his daughter is kidnapped, again, so she is not necessarily under physical threat, but she's kidnapped. Mitzvah l'suma derech b'amal l'ishtadlu b'hasalasa. This is not necessarily a given, but the Mechaber Paskins, go ahead, desecrate Shabbos. It's a mitzvah to go on the road and travel and do what you need to do to try to get your daughter back. And a person should be forced and compelled to don't worry about tchum, don't worry about traveling on Shabbos, do whatever you have to do to get her back. And the post can look at this, I don't have the source for you, but the authorities look at this and say, this is proof to the fact that somebody can be spiritually threatened, where their very life, they're kidnapped. But it's not a physical thing. They look at this as a proof, as a source, in their opinion, that says non-physical danger is something that still warrants a desecration. So how and where do you apply that? So this is the Ma'arik that I'm bringing you in the next source. Sherry, you want to read it?
It is abundantly clear that the paragraph.
Yeah.
It is abundantly clear that Esther did not violate any prohibition, and there was not even a trace of an Aveira. Rather, she did a great mitzvah to save all of Israel. Surely this is so, for when she came before the king, Ruach HaKodesh descended upon her. It was quite obviously an extremely great mitzvah. Likewise, we find that Yael, the wife of Hever Hakenu, was lauded regarding the incident of Sisera.
So, when you have the entirety of the Jewish people, that is different than when you have just a specific threat to, let's say, a specific group of people or sub-demographic. And perhaps the reason why Yehudis is put on this pedestal is because the entirety of the Jewish people were impacted, and therefore she took matters into her own hands. Now, you don't have the words there, but the next source in the Yerushalmi says, when somebody on Shabbos, they begin to question, should I go ask my rabbi? Should I go ask the Beis Din? Should I go get some advice first? The Yerushalmi there, it's not quoted, I don't have the quote for you, says that such a person is responsible for the ramifications. And so much so that they said you shouldn't ask. And somebody who does ask is sinning if they ask, because you're dilly-dallying, you're wasting time. You need to go ahead and you need to act. There needs to be some level of conviction, and you shouldn't be wavering. And I wanted to bring that.
Could this apply also then to Tamar?
That's
if Tamar has
yeah.
Ruach HaKodesh, and I'm saying this is what Rashi says,
Parsha.
that
Yeah.
she understood that Bnei Yisrael needed leaders coming from Yehuda, and she was the one who was going to provide that, and he wasn't giving her the option to do that. So therefore, there was no real Avera.
I'm kind of drawing a line here with everything that's Pikuach Nefesh related and being compelled to act accordingly. I wouldn't say that because there was no Jewish people yet. There was Bnei Yisrael in
Right.
the historic sense, but not in the Torah convocation, brisk covenantal sense. The last source, and then we'll tie it all together, wrap it up, take some of your questions, and get back to one or two of your comments. In source 14, the Rambam says that there's a group of women, and they are basically attacked or assaulted by these idolatrous peoples in a tameosa, and they want to defile an individual woman in this group. And they say, give us one of you, and then we'll let the rest of you go, or else none of you will get away. You're not allowed to give over a life of the Jewish people for such activity. And you see, it equates this immorality with physical endangerment. The same thing applies to idolatry as well. So you can't give over. So if there's somebody who's condemned, such as Sheva ben Bichri, who was he was deserving of capital punishment for his crime against the king, so then that's a different story when they specify such an individual. But even then, it's not ideal. Of course, so they can't even, if he's not guilty of capital punishment, they can't even give over such any one individual, even if they specify him. So you have, in the case of Hanukkah, you have the Greek people pursuing the actual existence of the Jewish people. You have Yehudis acting in a very daring and very resolute kind of way, and we see that we consider her to be the hero of the story, heroine on par with Esther and with the righteous women who were in Mitzrayim, and we see that she acted correctly, and even though the manner in which she did it, perhaps there could be some question about putting herself into such physical danger, putting herself in such, again, we don't know all the details because there are specifics. The details are still a little bit gray with regards to the actual real sources that we have, but putting herself in a potentially immoral situation as well. But when you have, even we see from some of these sources, the spiritual threats to the people, that is sufficient enough when you're talking about the entire Jewish people for Yehudis to go ahead and take matters into her own hands and to commit this assassination and to go ahead and make sure that the Jewish people have the strength and confidence they need to overcome the Yevanim, to overcome the Greeks. And that's why we have the story of Hanukkah as a result of that. There was one matter that we wanted to come back to. What was it?
Before we
Yeah,
do that,
go ahead.
I just asked a quick, short question. I just want to clarify, because the question about what malacha women don't do during that first half hour,
Yeah,
that's everything on
it's all a
Shabbos.
custom. Yeah, when we say malacha,
But like turning on a light, like that's not allowed on Shabbos, but as far as I thought that is allowed, like that's not what's considered the malacha.
And we wouldn't think that I couldn't turn on music.
It's all minhag.
I like
I
candles.
know,
It's
but
like morning.
within the minhag, what are we
Right.
defining as malacha? I never understood it as the 30-hour malacha.
Whatever you
That-
want your
that's why I
husband to do
asked
instead
that.
of you. That's what I think that's the definition I saw in the Mishnah Berurah. So.
I'd like to see your mission.
It's
crossed out and written in.
invented in France, so, you know, it's very different.
okay, give me 30 seconds here. 1 second.
I mean, always like in the kids' books, they talk about laundry.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like that is like the biggest thing that they talk about in kids' books. That's what they say.
What did
But
they
like
say?
the mom's still cooking, like
Right.
soup
So
and
I
yolk.
like that.
They're still, yeah, because you gotta eat. I mean, come on. But working, I mean cooking. Yeah, I like cooking. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like whatever you don't want to do. That's malacha. That's what malacha is in this case.
It's not really.
So if you don't want to get up to turn off the light, you say, I can't do it.
There you go.
I can't. It's malacha. That's it. Yeah. Can't do it. Just not gonna do it.
1 second. I mean, it's very clear that it's based. I mean, Ariel's correct. I mean, it doesn't say it in such a funny way over here, but it says that basically it's based on whatever city that you're in, whatever the community does, and generally speaking, I think that is the template. There's no reason to think that when he says the word malacha, he's talking about anything else other than the way that he would normally use the word malacha, which would be Shabbos malacha. Again, this is not something, at least in my family, that I've seen any women take upon themselves, but it's clearly something that has very long tradition that is really not so hard if you think about it, because a lot of people, it's limited to the first half hour. Maybe I'm sure there's some women who do it longer than that, as long as the candles are lit, as it implies as well. But really, the first half hour is the only thing that is really part of this custom. Yeah.
By the way, this was a very deceiving title. Because I think of Tamar as being a famous Bas Kohen.
It's so funny.
So I really thought you were going to talk about that.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah.
That's really what I thought was going to
When we're talking about the women being heroines,
Yeah.
It's like that.
This was
it sounds a little bit like, there's like a thread of not exactly being mechuyev to do something,
Right.
and
Not
like
obligatory.
so like you have Yehudis who goes and voluntarily does something.
Right.
Esther is coerced to do something. So what I was thinking about is because I was doing like Holocaust.
She's not coerced.
Who?
Mordechai, I think
Who?
we take him at his word. Take and say, look, Esther,
Mordechai
either
gave
you're going to do this or
confirmation.
somebody else is going to do it.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that when it comes to the national
What?
the national Jewish people in a time of crisis.
What's amazing is that this is a spiritual crisis, and the other ones
or physical.
Yeah,
But I'm saying like during,
and our Masorah equates them. Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
saying when you look back at the times of the Holocaust, like there were
Mhm.
no clear things of Mesiras like you don't, like what was Mesiras Nefesh? Saving yourself and your friend, you know, abandoning your family. Really, it's like you had to make these decisions on the cuff.
There's no Ruach HaKodesh in modern times on the level that they had. And, you know, clearly Esther, for sure, had Ruach HaKodesh, and there's reason to believe that the other women who we talked about tonight also had Ruach HaKodesh. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it was like when we're tested under these circumstances, like
Right.
like God forbid, it's really you're really not always sure what's the, like you could look back and say that was the right decision. I mean, we have a legend.
This is the model to follow.
But I'm
In the
saying,
moment.
And
I'm saying like you have a legend. I think it was confirmed that you had over 90 girls
Mhm.
abducted by Nazis.
Mhm.
And they were going to be used for immoral purposes,
Mhm.
and they committed suicide in the Beis Yaakov building.
Mhm.
So it's not like they asked a psak, you know, like
Right.
people had to
And then
make-
very similar story in Tisha B'Av, and it's not like they had the ability to ask a psak.
Right. So I'm saying it's like we're you know, it's an awesome kind of thing. Like if it's a national event and you're trying to make the best decision that you have at the time.
Look, we're not going to know until Mashiach comes exactly what took place and who gets all the credit in the world. But, you know, I mean, it's not a stretch, at least to suggest that, you know, Sarah Schneer preserved what you and I know today as a thriving, learning Torah, you know, community as a result of her efforts of making sure
But that's not where I'm
Yeah.
going. I'm going like you said, like let's say you
about
had
putting
the-
yourself in danger and all.
No, I'm saying like you had the Warsaw Uprising, right?
Yeah.
So you had this rabbi, I think Zemba or Ziemba, who
Right.
was a big
Menachem
gadol,
Zemba. Yeah.
who said yes, you know what you're doing is a mitzvah and it's a good thing. But you had
Mhm.
other people saying you're endangering the ghetto. They're going to be angry, and it's really hard when you have. It's really hard.
That's why, you know, we miss having divinely inspired leadership along the lines of these women who had Ruach HaKodesh. Required reading, by the way, for everybody. The Warsaw Ghetto Diaries. If you haven't read it, it's absolutely required
I'm
reading.
just saying what they had to contend with. You know, even when the K-pop, not the K-pops, when they had those, I forgot what it's called for a second, you know, when they're gathering together, and should we give 1,000 people, because the Nazis want 1,000 people,
Right.
because you let the, and, you know, and then, you know, everyone is saying, we can't do it, and then they find one rabbi that says you can do it, and they went to
Right.
the rabbi that says you can do it.
Yeah,
but
I read a
luckily-
story. I read a diary of a woman who worked in the office where they had to submit the list when they pared down the community and pared down the community,
Right.
pared down the community. Yeah, it's very hard to know, and that's why we suffer. You know, we suffer because we don't have the leadership, we don't have the base of English, we don't have the divine inspiration to allow us to guide us, and they did, and Yehudis did. So that's a huge difference. That's what we're davening for in many ways. Yehudis, you had your hand up.
I was thinking, what you were saying, I was thinking, it made me think the Belsky brothers, there's these Jewish
Mhm.
partisans that protected other Jews, and they would take women and children, any and other partisans never did in
Yeah.
the force. The Belsky brothers would, and they were endangering themselves in order to take people that are weak.
Right. I'm just
And
saying
it's amazing,
really-
or like, yeah.
Oh, that they never sacrificed.
Right.
Yeah, they were very unique. It was like the only.
This is
Jewish
not
partisan
required, but the
Yeah.
movie Defiance is
Yes,
suggested.
Defiance. Excellent. The book is excellent.
Defiance.
It's by
Defiance.
the Kama Tech. The book is by the Kama Tech. So good.
Yeah.
Based on.
But yeah, there's all
Um,
these stories of people that. But I'm just wondering if you
Yeah.
put this. Like I wonder, her father, when he went the other way.
Mhm.
So even he, I got all. I'm guessing he was.
No, it's know.
But she had her own compass. It sounds like. I'm guessing did she
No,
go to
he
Rob
went
and
at
ask?
the
I'm guessing
end.
she
I
asked
don't know
Rob.
when in his life this happened, but
Oh.
at the end of his life,
At the very, very
Oh,
end
did
of
she
his
the
life.
very end, that could have been after.
Yeah, it was after.
Yes.
It was after. Yeah. Meaning at the end of his life.
No,
He turned at the end?
He went off the derrick when
But
he was
so
old.
sad. It's almost at the end.
Right, he went off the derrick.
Yeah, he went off there at the very end. The Kohen Gadol.
So that's what's to say that we always learn is that you can never trust yourself
Yeah.
until
That's
the
what
end
the
of your
Gemara
time.
Brachos that Pearl's quoting is that you can't ever trust yourself until the the last moment, and even then you can't trust yourself. So,
This is a very little bit depressing, can we end on that?
yes, we'll end on this. Lubavitcher Rebbe says that based on the Arizal, that the Gilgul, I don't know how people are supposed to know this, but I don't know, who knows how the Arizal knew everything that the Arizal knows. That the reincarnation of this high priest, this Yochanan Kohen Gadol, was Elazar ben Dordaya, who was a man who sinned his whole life, and then at the last moment he did tshuva. And it was the opposite of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, and the soul's everlasting. However, the soul gets eventually to that point where it repairs itself. That's the tradition that exists. That's out there. There's a more positive thing to end on. Okay.
I'm not so sure.
Not so sure?
I think
Okay.
the positive is that we should make some donuts and make latkes and
Okay.
make a happy Hanukkah for
Yeah, but dairy latkes or something.
What's with the cheese? Is it really
That's the
supposed to be-
cheese. That's very good. That's the whole. That was the tool.
cheesecake on
That
your
was the
doorstep?
weapon.
Do
It was a
cheesecake on-
weaponized cheesecake.
Oh, what's serious?
Yeah, cheese.
I don't like flakes, I'll use any
There you go. I don't know how you do that.
Well, because I eat it all the time, right? I eat Friday night Shabbos, leftovers.
Oh,
whatever.
yeah, guys.
Don't tell Ariel Sherman.
Let's-
She doesn't like flakes.
I know, I don't understand what you're saying, but,
I don't.
December 2nd, my house at, 11 o'clock, we're having, Rabbi Adam Winston. Yeah, okay, at the, across from the
It's
Goldberg's
20 for
house.
our cost.